Consider how toxic, gaslighting, opportunist people lull you into a sense of acceptance, then poke and prod until you roar back. Manipulative souls play sweet melodies with their words, weaving illusions that your concerns are trivial, your memories unreliable, your worth dependent on their approval. They enjoy watching your confusion, relish seeing your uncertainty bloom like a noxious flower. Their cunning becomes the soil that nurtures the shadows in your heart, shadows you never knew existed. Over time, these individuals discover that each lie, each condescending smirk, each mental entanglement sows seeds of suppressed rage. They aim to fashion you into a docile puppet, but in their haste, they awaken something primal. The puppet strings unravel, replaced by claws that slash through illusions. Eventually, they realize the impossible. The caged creature, formed by their cruelty, is no longer contained by gentle words or patronizing smiles. It stands before them, unchained, unmerciful, and it is their turn to tremble at the monstrous reflection they helped forge. Now that monstrous reflection hunts them in their nightmares, they wonder how the old method, twisting words and warping memories, failed. They once stood confident in their manipulations, calling black white, feeding you self-doubt by the spoonful. Yet every spoonful fueled the beast's growth, thickening its hide, sharpening its fangs. The metamorphosis was subtle. You tried reason, tried appeasement, tried bending to their version of events. Still, each time you yielded, they demanded more, devaluing your existence with a grin. The gaslighting grew more refined, but so did your capacity for introspection. Under the constant barrage of disrespect, your soul toughened. You realized their projection was not a reflection of your flaws, but a testament to their fear. Fear that if you ever discovered your own power, you would demolish their carefully spun illusions. And demolish them, you did. The moment you embraced the darker side of your resilience, you shattered the cage that they never believed you could escape. The cunning aspect is how manipulative people nurture your potential for destruction without realizing it. Every belittling comment or twisted scenario stokes the fires they hope will remain under their control. They assume your resentment will be small enough to manage, that your anger will burn out in silent corners. But corners never remain corners once darkness takes on a life of its own. It slithers into unseen halls, grows tendrils that wrap around your heart, merging bitterness with raw determination. They named you a monster behind your back, laughing at your confusion. Yet in truth, monsters do not frighten easily. They learn to harness the fear swirling around them. So day by day, your confusion recedes, replaced by the calm poise of someone who has seen too much, endured too much, to remain docile. By the time they notice your transformation, it is far too late. What they once poked at like a cornered pet has blossomed into a predator no longer content to cower. Their illusions about keeping you small turn to dust the instant you decide to bare your fangs. Their illusions crack, not through physical brutality, but through the chilling serenity you now possess. Gaslighting relies on making you question your mind. Once your mind refines its own truth, their tactics crumble. They tried sowing doubt, but doubt eventually became your impetus for self-verification. You scoured memories, tested your sanity, confirmed that their rewriting of events served only their hunger for control. Now that you see their game, their words slip off your armor. Their frantic attempts at belittling or scaring you echo hollow in the corridors of your newly fortified psyche. The cunning grin you wear unsettles them more than any outburst could, for they sense a shift in power. You do not lunge blindly in rage. You watch them unravel, watch them stutter as the old scripts fail. This tension grows like a silent storm in the atmosphere, each breath thickening with anticipation. They realize the cage they crafted no longer closes around you. It stands empty, rusting in irrelevance, while the being they tried to imprison roams free. They tried to call you insane, tried to rewrite your identity in lines that cast you as a danger to yourself. Yet ironically, it is their own minds that quake with the realization that they fanned flames they cannot extinguish. The monster they wanted to keep behind bars becomes the star of their nightmares, prowling the halls of their subconscious. They question each decision that led to your liberation, wonder how they so thoroughly misjudged your spirit. Every time they slip into restless sleep, images of your unblinking stare haunt them, reminding them that illusions hold no power over a mind awakened by adversity. They cannot hide behind jokes or patronizing remarks anymore. The cunning enthrallment of gaslighting dissolves into a new atmosphere. Fear that they birthed a force unstoppable. This fear eats at them, a silent parasite lodging in their confidence, reminding them that their manipulations had an unforeseen cost. To an outsider, it may appear monstrous for you to relish their terror. But consider how they devoured your sense of security for so long, how they turned reality into a labyrinth of mistrust. If monstrous is the label they pinned on you, then monstrous you become. Embracing that label on your own terms flips the narrative they tried to impose. The worst horror for them is that you are no longer the shell of a person they attempted to shape. You tower over their illusions, an embodiment of resilience they can neither predict nor sabotage. Every step you take sets them further on edge, each movement outmaneuvering their outdated tactics. Each night, they are left with the knowledge that their handiwork, those slow manipulations, that mental sabotage, have wrought a being who owes them no kindness, a being who sees through their illusions like glass. Others may question whether you lost your empathy in this metamorphosis. The villainous streak you now exhibit is less about cruelty for cruelty's sake, and more about refusing to yield to false narratives. The darkness you harness is your shield, forged out of necessity, not pure malevolence. The manipulative, gaslighting opportunist crowd forced you into corners until you decided corners no longer exist. Maybe you laugh at the irony that the compassion you once showered upon them returned as scorn and gaslighting. The final straw snapped, leaving a creature whose moral code has been refined by treachery. Now that empathy is reserved for those deserving, not squandered on illusions. This refined approach to kindness terrifies them more than any savage outburst. They hoped to twist your empathy into guilt, but you shut that door, no apology given. The nightmares they endure revolve around your newfound clarity. For clarity is the last thing they wanted you to obtain. The monster they tried to cage now rules their nightmares, a poetic justice that echoes long after daylight returns. By night, they toss and turn, fearing your silent approach, your unblinking stare, your refusal to let them define your reality. By day, they force a smile, pray that illusions might be resurrected, hoping you might revert to your old self. That old self is gone. The new you stands watchful, calm, perhaps even amused at their panic. They wanted a toy to manipulate, a puppet to dance on strings of gaslighting. Instead, they awakened a mind determined to own its narrative. The terror they feel is the final fruit of their manipulations. Bitter, unstoppable, served back to them in every moment of your unshackled presence. The tides of mental control have turned, leaving them stranded on a shore of despair. Each attempt to reel you back fails, for you have transcended their illusions. A silent specter they cannot outrun. Think about someone who's been pushed too far, for too long. At first, this person might have stayed quiet, hoping kindness or patience would get them through. Others took advantage of that silence, thinking they had an easy target, an obedient soul who wouldn't fight back. They used words that cut deep, set up traps to keep this person small and afraid. They tried to make the person feel helpless, like no one would ever help or believe them. But something powerful can happen when a person reaches their limit. Hurt and anger twist into a drive for survival. After long nights of heartbreak, the person wakes up one morning and decides to become stronger. No more letting others shape their destiny. No more bowing to a crowd that delights in manipulation. This is the moment everything changes. The moment the monster inside steps forward. It's not an evil thing, but a fierce spirit that has had enough. Once that spirit is unleashed, the people who tried to control or belittle it realize they made a huge mistake. The same person they insulted and toyed with now stands tall, no longer trembling. When they talk, their voice carries the echo of a hard-earned calm. It's the calm of someone who learned to rely on themselves because no one else ever truly listened. In that calm, the oppressors sense a new problem. Their old tricks don't work anymore. They throw out the same hurtful words, but the words fall flat, as if bouncing off armor. They try to scare the person back into submission, but fear doesn't reach that hard anymore. The monster they warned others about is real, but it's not the evil threat they painted it to be. It's a person who decided to take control of their own life. That alone sends shivers through those who built their power on keeping others small. People always wonder how someone who seemed so timid or so easily hurt could become so strong. The transformation usually happens step by step, each insult or betrayal fueling a deep resolve. The final push might be something small, like one insult too many, or a casual betrayal on a day when the heart was already tired. Suddenly, everything that was bottled up erupts. But instead of wild anger, it forms a clear decision. I will never let this happen again. This clarity is scarier to bullies than any tantrum. Tantrums come and go, easily dismissed. A calm, focused mind stands in a league of its own. The cage they put around this person was never strong. It was made of lies and intimidation. Once the person sees through it, it crumbles. And with it, crumbles the illusion of power the oppressors thought they had. The monster they used to scare everyone with has turned out to be a fearless version of the victim they mistreated. Now, that so-called monster owns every room they enter. The bullies can't understand why their mocking or threats no longer hold any sway. They panic, trying to gather allies, but people sense the new energy in the air. Some cheer silently for the one who found their power. Others step aside, unsure how to handle this unexpected change. The bullies realize they can't just talk their way out of it anymore. Their old methods seem childish, like a temper tantrum thrown by someone who feels control slipping away. Meanwhile, the one they tormented walks on, eyes bright, posture strong, as if saying, "Your words and manipulations no longer affect me." The ones who cause pain now watch in dread as the person they targeted begins to succeed or find peace. This success is more than financial or social. It's the calm that surfaces when you accept yourself. The courage that says you don't need their approval. It's the subtle shift from asking, "What did I do wrong?" to declaring, "I am worth more than you allowed me to be." That single change in perspective has the power to unravel years of bullying. Suddenly, the bullies see themselves as small, needing to tear others down to feel important. When they look into the eyes of the person they once tormented, they see a reflection of their own failures. Nothing burns more than realizing you fed someone's fire by trying to extinguish their hope. You inadvertently helped create the very force you feared. This new presence is often peaceful, but can be startling. The so-called monster doesn't walk around screaming for revenge or demanding apologies. It doesn't need a dramatic showdown or an audience to prove its power. Its existence alone is a statement. I overcame you. I overcame the lies you told me about myself. That quiet pride and unshakable self-belief sends colder chills down a bully's spine than any threat could. The bullies realize they can't rewrite the story anymore because the newly awakened soul is the one holding the pen. That confidence disrupts all the old dynamics. People who once stood on the sidelines, unsure of who to support, see the shift and respect it. The world loves a comeback, and there's no better comeback than one that arises from what others tried to bury. Some might think this transformation means the victim becomes cruel, but that's rarely the case. What changes is the willingness to stand up for one's worth, to say no to abuse, to see through manipulations. The monster label might come from the bullies themselves, as they fear losing control. They call it monstrous because it terrifies them to see a person so firmly in command of their destiny. They see someone who will not yield, not apologize for existing, not second-guess every step. That sense of self can seem monstrous to those who can't handle genuine strength. The heart of the transformed person may still hold kindness, but it's no longer overshadowed by fear. It's a different kind of kindness that doesn't equate to self-sacrifice for unworthy people. The ones who used to do the hurting aren't prepared to handle the living proof of their failure to break another. That presence hunts them in nightmares, a shadow they can't outrun. Every time they recall how they used to belittle or gaslight, they taste regret. They can't sleep peacefully, not when the memory of their cruelty stands victorious outside. They worry that one day, that unstoppable soul might decide to strike back. Ironically, the unstoppable soul rarely focuses on vengeance. They're busy living free, building a future untainted by old torment. But the oppressors stew in guilt and insecurity. They can't bear the idea of someone surpassing them, especially someone they tried to keep down. This unresolvable conflict sours their days and haunts their nights. And so the circle closes. They cause the creation of something they can't handle. They realize too late that their torment sharpened the claws of their target rather than cutting them down. Their nightmares revolve around the fact that no chain can be tightened enough to hold someone who decides they own their fate. Those who toss labels like monster onto others often reveal the monsters within themselves, casting shadows they hope never turn back toward them. A deep irony lurks here. The loudest accusations sometimes come from people terrified of their own capacity for darkness. They see traits in others: fierceness, independence, rage under control, and label it monstrous because it stirs their internal fears. Imagine someone leveling blame, pointing fingers at a supposed villain, while ignoring the festering parts in their own mind that mirror what they scorn. Shadows are easier to project onto someone else than to face alone in the stillness after midnight. The ones who brand others as unholy creatures, who claim them as too far gone to be redeemed, might be hinting at their unspoken nightmares. Through condemnation, they distract attention from their private turmoil. This is how scapegoating begins, how entire groups can be labeled monstrous without reflection on the part of the accusers. The real terror arises when the so-called monster refuses to remain an easy target. It stands upright, claims its right to breathe, and in that act shows the watchers a reflection of their own potential for cruelty. Those watchers recoil, protesting the horror that stands before them, but the horror originated in their hearts. They fear the confrontation with that truth, so they lash out, intensifying the label. They fail to realize the monster stands unchained and uninterested in cowering. The watchers wanted to keep it as their scapegoat, forgetting that no one remains scapegoat forever. The scapegoat eventually sees through illusions, and once illusions fade, those watchers face a silent question: who truly harbors the monstrous soul? Healing from that experience takes time, and it is never a simple path. Emotional scars from false labels and twisted narratives run deep, carving doubts into the soul. To emerge from that confusion, one must first peel away the illusions placed by those who used fear to control. Then there's the challenge of confronting the self, because carrying a label like monster eventually distorts how one sees their own reflection. Untangling that distortion is a process, requiring slow steps of trust in one's worth and a willingness to acknowledge that not every shadow belongs to you alone. The world can be relentless in how it assigns roles, but one's identity does not lie in the hands of those who misunderstood or manipulated. The real journey lies in reaffirming personal goals, values, and boundaries. It hurts to realize how deeply others projected their darkness onto you, how they twisted small flaws into a monstrous image. Yet there's a bitter irony in that pain. It can forge a stronger sense of self, because once illusions fracture, they leave behind a raw truth that shapes new resilience. And yes, healing changes a person permanently. Even if the scars remain, they serve as signs of surviving a landscape designed to break the spirit. No magical erasure wipes away the memories, but time can transform wounds into wisdom. That wisdom emerges quietly yet powerfully, altering the course of one's destiny and fueling a determination not to repeat the cycles of pain. This new essence stands tall, no longer swayed by external definitions, and that sense of self unsettles those who tried to forge illusions in the first place. Human nature resists seeing others do better, especially those once deemed lesser or monstrous. It's a quiet, primal jealousy that creeps in whenever the watchers witness someone rising beyond the confines once set for them. They might disguise that jealousy in cruel laughter or forced politeness, but inside, they rage at the notion of losing the upper hand. For so long, they found comfort believing themselves in control, safe in their moral or social superiority. When the so-called monster emerges as more whole, more successful, the watchers choke on a sour flavor. Their illusions suggested you would fail or remain dependent on their pity. Now they see you forging successes that eclipse their own, and that dives deeper than any revenge you could plan. The watchers flail in bitterness, for no ointment soothes an ego scorned by proven resilience. They realize that every sabotage, every lie, only propelled your inner fortitude. This revelation terrifies them. The watchers look around for allies, finding few, because your success speaks louder than their accusations. They cringe in the knowledge that the same darkness they projected outward might dwell in them. They fear, deep down, that they never confronted their own monstrous streak. Meanwhile, you walk free, unaffected by their envy, fueling your momentum with confidence. Each achievement you claim reminds them they cannot rewrite your story. They took their shots, they shaped illusions, but your unstoppable progress proves a more daunting narrative. At last, their resentment lingers, but they can do nothing to stop your rise.